Hello everyone, this is Coca Sexton with InsideView. Thanks for joining today's Social Selling University webinar with our guests Barbara Giamonco and Kent Gregoire. They are with a company called Social Centered Selling, and their primary focus is to help companies get up and running with their sales departments leveraging social media and other tools. Barbara and Kent, are you there?
We're still here.
For you.
Yes, it's afternoon for us, and we have such a large group. My bet is somebody out there in the world is it's dark for them.
I'm sure it is. So one quick housekeeping item. I just want to make sure that everybody on the phone is aware that we will be following up with all the registered attendees, and we want to hear your feedback about this webinar series and what else you would like to hear in future webinars coming from Social Selling University. So you'll be hearing from somebody on our side at InsideView to get that feedback. So again, I appreciate all of you taking time out of your day today to watch this and learn a few things. And a recording will be available shortly after. We usually try and get these things out about 2 hours after the webinar stops, so we have to do some processing. But we will send that off to everybody also. So without further ado, I will pass this over to Barbara and Kent.
All right, Coca. Third, in our series this quarter, so we appreciate the fact that everybody's joining us today to talk about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, and that's really around this notion of making sure that you are perceived as a trusted advisor. And so, Coca, it's okay with you, right, if we encourage people to chat in any questions they have, right?
Absolutely. Let's keep this as interactive as possible.
Okay, fabulous. Well, let's quickly introduce ourselves. I am Barb Giamonco. I'm the Executive Vice President of Sales and Social Media here at Social Centered Selling. And the couple things you need to know about me, I have been selling professionally for close to 30 years. On my own in business for 10 years now, and also have a particular passion and a lot of experience in using technology to drive sales opportunities forward. And of course, I'm very passionate about how to leverage tools like LinkedIn and InsideView and Twitter as a way to really get in front of opportunities more quickly, demonstrate credibility, and then shrink that sales cycle so you move from those first opportunities into close. I also had the pleasure of being named by InsideView, thank you so much, as one of the top 25 sales leaders to watch. And I did cap a corporate career, in technology, and when I retired from Microsoft, started doing my own thing and just love being an entrepreneur. So, for those of you who are tweeting, please use the hashtag #SocialSellExcel and include @SocialSellingU in your messages. We would really appreciate that. We want to keep the conversation moving forward. And with that, Kent, why don't you go ahead and tell people about you?
Sure. I'm Kent Gregoire, and I'm Chief Executive and Sales Strategist at Social Centered Selling. And what you should know about me is for the past 20 years, I've really enjoyed helping organizations and sales professionals supercharge their sales efforts by incorporating training and employee performance programs around our research-based methodologies that have gone through extensive testing to produce the proven results that our clients enjoy. I founded and served as CEO of more than a dozen fast-growth companies, and much of my experience has involved bringing solutions to the market, building brand equity, and successfully leveraging business partnerships and sales channels to achieve some really great growth. And that's what I wanted to tell you about me today, and I'm looking forward to our time together.
All right, outstanding. Well, so let's talk about what our presentation entails. So we've got 60 short minutes, but again, as Coca said, we want to keep this interactive. So feel free to chat in questions, and we will certainly do our best to address those as we work through the conversation today. What we really wanted to do is lay out the difference between what we believe is a commodity supplier, someone who is a salesperson perceived as a problem solver, and a trusted advisor relationship. And then we also want to reinforce what buyer 2.0 executives are expecting from salespeople these days when they get into those sales meetings. Now, here's what's interesting. As Ken and I were framing this and putting it together, we know that a lot of people talk about the importance of becoming a trusted advisor. What we don't often hear a lot about is how you actually know if you are being perceived in that particular way. And so very excited to share some things with you about that we know from experience and from some very extensive research with senior level executives. They told us what the characteristics of a trusted advisor look like. So we'll be focusing in on that. So we really want you to understand credibility and trust and what those components look like, as well as we will be interspersing strategies for leveraging social media. We certainly advocate social as part of the sales process today, but of course it's not the only thing. You know, great offline approaches to your sales process are also very, very important. But there are some things that we know that are really best practices in terms of the approaches for engaging executives and how to conduct the most effective sales meeting. Finally, we're going to talk about the right questions to ask and the ones to avoid. This can really be the kiss of death for you if you don't really, make sure that you handle this in the right way when you're sitting down to have that discussion with the buyer. And then finally, the place where, we know people sometimes forget the importance of communicating your value, the business results you're delivering to the organization as a result of them working with you. And so that's really going to be our focus today. So let's kick it off by having Kent really talk about how you establish that credibility in advance of sales opportunities, both online and in person.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. So one of the things that executives told us in the research study is that they viewed as it being very critical for salespeople to establish credibility with them was for the salesperson to thoroughly understand their business. Another key factor was that salesperson was able to marshal the resources required to solve problems. Pretty important to them. Executives don't want to deal with multiple people from different organizations to help solve the problems in which they're facing, and they want to know that one person has the responsibility and accountability to help them resolve the problems. So a couple things today will come out in particular is establishing credibility at the executive level based on this research, and another is how can we determine in terms of how to become perceived as a trusted advisor to the executive, thereby securing return access. Promise to share with you some shortcuts that will help you go to school on the client's organization with a minimum investment of your time, and to help position yourself to become perceived as that trusted advisor to the executive. Now let's take a little look at what I'd say the issues are surrounding credibility. So how can a salesperson demonstrate consistent capability? You'll soon learn that the two components of credibility are capability and integrity. You're also going to learn that you have to demonstrate consistent performance in both areas to become perceived as a trusted advisor to executives in your organization. There are three questions that you're going to have to answer. The first one is, as shown here on the screen, how can a salesperson demonstrate consistent capability? The second is, how can a salesperson develop a consistent level of trust with an executive? And the third question, how can a salesperson develop a trusted advisor relationship with a client executive? It's probably pretty easy to answer these questions individually, but you'll soon see that these questions are very much interconnected and that they must be addressed collectively in order to achieve a trusted advisor status with executives. The first thing I'd like you to take and consider are the two components of credibility. They are integrity and capability. You see, it's clear that you must display your capability, but be careful you don't become perceived as merely an extra pair of hands or an expert for hire. That's a challenge that sometimes salespeople have, and it's really important that we understand that. The other is integrity. To enhance the relationship, you'll also need to continuously demonstrate your integrity, which will ultimately help you become perceived as a trusted advisor, a person that they trust. Your objective in moving in this direction is to be perceived as reliable and trustworthy on a consistent basis. Be careful that you don't operate in just this direction. building the personal aspect of the relationship and neglecting the capability need. That sometimes we see when somebody feels that spending a lot of time outside of the work context with an individual on the golf course or other means can in fact neglect being able to demonstrate the capability that you can bring. So if you're out playing golf, make sure that you're also demonstrating that capability. And in order to become perceived as a trusted advisor, you'll have to move up on both components at the same time so that you can operate in what we call the client value zone. Here's where you'll become perceived as a trusted advisor and start to develop a collaborative relationship with a client executive. This is the quadrant in which, the very best salespeople who are not the commodity suppliers but truly understand solutions, how to create and articulate value in a way that the client executives are really able to articulate that value back to you as professional salespeople. And of course, this is where we all want to be. So let's take a look at how client executives describe trusted advisors. I always think this is really interesting. What is it that we need to be doing? What do we need to exhibit to be perceived as a trusted advisor? I'm not going to list all these. I'm going to put them up on the screen for you, but I'd certainly like to highlight a couple of them. The first one, give us solutions to problems that could not be developed by people in our own company. In fact, during the research study, one of the research studies, a very high-level executive was asked, tell us, why is it that you agree to meet with salespeople? You spend 30 or more % of your time in any given week meeting with professional salespersons. And he simply said, because this is where I'm able to get some very creative solutions. These people in which I'm meeting with have seen these challenges in other organizations, and I want the benefit of their expertise. And that really does validate our role as professional salespeople, and as it turns out, it's the trait that senior level executives and certainly influential people in organizations want to hear. They want us to marshal the resources that are required to solve a problem, and they're particularly interested in making sure we seek first to understand the challenges that they are experiencing in the organization and what are the solutions that we may be able to help create for them that brings them value. So those are some of the things that are very important, as well as demonstrating both integrity and capability over the long run. Let's take a look at examples of what client executives have done for us as professional salespeople to demonstrate they perceive you to be a trusted advisor. They may have pulled you aside and shared some confidential information with you. We certainly get pretty excited about that, and we know that that is a very important piece to developing our relationship. Certainly gives us great insights. Unveiling long-term plans. Asking us to come in early during the buying process, during the buying cycle, to help establish the objectives of the project. Maybe they've asked you for advice that has product solutions in which you are able to bring to them directly, but they perceive you in a trusted way, and they really respect your opinion. They want your insight. There's many different ways, but these are some of them. I also like it when, of course, and we all do, when they ask us to come in and help them write the requirements for an RFP. We certainly would hope that they don't have to go to an RFP process when we have a trusted advisor relationship, but sometimes they need to, and when we can be in the driver's seat there, it's particularly helpful. Now let's examine the different perspectives of people at different levels in the client organization, and in particular around areas of understanding the client's business. But before we get there, I'd like for Barbara to really talk about our new type of buyer.
Thanks, Kat. Great stuff. It's always great to hear again, what client executives believe are the traits that demonstrate to them that we are the trusted advisor. And so, really appreciate the examples that you shared. And so, as we're thinking about how does this all fit with this new world of social selling, we reinforce this every time. And Series Decisions has a slightly lower percentage. Harvard Business Review and Gartner identified that buyers today are completing roughly 60 to 80% of that buy-in cycle before they interact with sales. And so as a result, it really means that we have to, as sales professionals, shift up our approach a little bit, because some of the traits that you need to understand about that new buyer today is they are the person who is leveraging the social web. So when they're in that mode in the very beginning of realizing that they have a business problem that they need to solve, they start thinking about who they can turn to, what companies to work with, what's the experience been, and they're turning to their peers, and they're going to LinkedIn groups to do a lot of their research. And so, Ken, if you can just kind of move forward with the slide, it'll also help to reinforce that they own that buying process. They are already doing a lot to check out about you and your products and services. And they're looking for that immediate value. So in other words, if Coca's looking for a product or a service, and he happens to land on Barb Giamonco's profile or Kent Gregoire's profile on LinkedIn, and there's largely no information there, or there's no compelling content, there's really nothing to suggest or demonstrate what results Coca might get in working with us, well, there's an extremely high likelihood that he's going to move on. And so for this reason in particular, it's so important for all of us as sales professionals to be managing our brand and ensuring that when that buyer shows up, that there is enough compelling information there for them to want to do business with you, for them to want to engage you. I know I shared this story last time that sometimes what's happening today is that the buying cycle and the sales cycle are not lining up because sometimes salespeople are missing this fundamental point. But I'll share a quick story before we move on. We know that one of two great ways to get an opportunity into an account and move more quickly is either through being sponsored by somebody credible in the organization or getting that referral. So earlier this year, I was referred in to a new company by somebody that they had worked with, that they know and they trust. Well, you might think that would have led to an immediate phone call. But not so these days in this world of social selling. What they told me later, when we did actually have the phone call, is that the story went like this. They got the referral. They were very impressed. But the very first thing they did as a team is they went on LinkedIn. They looked at the profile. They watched the videos. They went to the website. They checked out the Twitter account. They Googled me, right? You get the idea. Once they had done their homework, that is the moment when the executives decided they wanted to have a conversation with me. And as you can imagine, what happened in that sales call? Right? In that sales call, it is now, we're just confirming price and the basic logistics. They had already made their decision before they ever had a conversation with me. So when you're thinking about not only becoming a trusted advisor, you need to also be thinking and asking yourself if you are honestly adapting your sales approach to accommodate and take into consideration this new buyer who is jump-starting that sales cycle without you. So let's move ahead and see what it means to really start to dig in to understanding the client business.
Great, Barbara. So you need to be aware and take note of the key changes that are taking place in your client's business. The factors that can change and impact your client can originate either internally or even perhaps oftentimes externally and are called the business drivers. I happen to really look very closely for business drivers because I know one thing, that when we can identify them, they certainly are some of the major reasons why initiatives will be put in place. And I oftentimes will ask myself the question, should I be pursuing this opportunity? And one of the questions I want to ask as a subset of that is, what are the drivers that are taking place? And are they significant enough that the client executive or the team that's working on making the buy decision, that it doesn't have a consequence to it if they don't make the decision? And it's really important. I think drivers are very essential. I think probably many people on the call would agree. The client will typically put these initiatives in place around projects or plans to address these drivers. A client may define a number of initiatives which they may implement. However, it might be said their ability to implement these initiatives is limited by the resources such as people, money, and time that they have available. Again, we want to understand that these initiatives, when they are put in place, is another indicator that this is the real bona fide opportunity that we should be pursuing. But as it turns out, there's typically in every organization a breakthrough initiative that the client must act upon. It's deemed so critical to the client's success because of their specific payback that can result from the implementation or the serious consequences if the project is delayed or not acted upon. Now, I look for these breakthrough initiatives because they really they sometimes can be pretty easy to identify because they're going to reshape the company's destiny. And if your solution addresses and can provide value for this breakthrough initiative, you are going to get the client's attention. You're going to get it quickly and particularly at the executive level. You should realize that these breakthrough initiatives are typically also only identified at the executive level. It does make them, when you're operating at that level, pretty easy to learn about. They want to share them with you. But at lower levels, they rarely ever really understand them or understand why they're so important. A breakthrough initiative is just a great place to be selling, and so we want to try to do our best job in understanding what breakthrough initiatives may be in place in the organization to help support sales opportunities.
And Ken, I wanted to just jump in for a quick second as you're showing us examples of drivers, because this is where I want to give a plug for tools like InsideView. There is so much information available to us that we can leverage to find out what are some of those internal and external factors that are happening. I mean, one of my favorite features of the tool, as you well know, is not only the Buzz tab, but being able to set up watch alerts on companies that we're tracking so that we can get real-time information. We can see press releases about leadership changes or acquisitions that are happening or whatever it might be. But we talk about this, as you know, you and I talk about this all the time, and we talked about it in the session last month with Coco. The research opportunities here are huge, and there's just no excuse for that savvy salesperson, that true trusted advisor, not to leverage this technology. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there, that it's not as challenging to locate information about these types of drivers and initiatives as it used to be years ago before we had access to all the power of the web.
Barbara, that reminds me of a call that I received yesterday from a CEO of a relatively small company, pretty interesting technology that they have. However, she went out on a meeting, and she had the opportunity to meet with the CEO, and she was asking for my advice on, the meeting went really well, we performed really well, but she said, I was surprised that they couldn't identify any initiatives within their company. And what she was looking for was really some spot coaching. What needed to be done to prepare for that meeting? And what was really missing is there was an opportunity to do some research and understand, what drivers are existing in this it's a Fortune 500 company. It's a pretty large company. Information's available. And, what are the drivers that are out there? And while talking with this particular CEO on the phone, I actually went into InsideView and I added them. And I also went out on the internet and I actually found 2 initiatives that they had done some research and a little digging. They could have gone in and perhaps have done a better job on the sales call. And the context of the conversation, while she wanted some coaching, what she really wanted to also understand is what is the work we can be doing up front to better qualify opportunities before 3 people from my team go out on this call. And drivers are one of the key areas in terms of, answering the question, is this an opportunity we should pursue or not? And I'm going to drill down a little bit more on drivers so that everybody gets maybe a little more in-depth understanding, and I bet some people on the call are already doing this. It'd be great if they chime in. Maybe they have some additional questions on the chat line. But business drivers do come in a variety of forms, as I said earlier, either internally or externally. Internal factors are typically operational or financial, such as increasing revenue or decreasing expenses would be a couple pretty simple examples of financial drivers. Having the right product mix or the right skill mix of qualified people to deliver your consulting services is another example of an operational driver. But we oftentimes will find that many of the situations in which we're working on external factors, and it may be around customer retention, could be a significant issue. Loss of market share that could represent another key factor. Firms that are our clients' business partners today may become their competitors down the road. Are there some globalization? Are they doing business globally? And how does this actually need to be factored in with regard to the solution in which you might be presenting to the company? So the greatest thing about drivers is that is the indication of something that they need to do. We want to measure that. Is it strong enough? Are there dire consequences if they don't make a decision to move forward? And if it's a significant consequence for the organization, it could even be a breakthrough initiative. And one of the areas around breakthrough initiative, and it's the only initiative where uses of funds from the decision makers doesn't actually come into play. What I mean by that is anytime that senior level executives are involved in making buy decisions, they'll take a look at the investment of comparable things that they could purchase. It may not even be a similar solution. When it's a breakthrough initiative, they're not looking at other uses of funds because it's predetermined that this is what they absolutely need to fund, and it's a very high likelihood that they're going to make a buy decision in a relatively short period of time. Barbara.
So, part of this whole notion of building that credibility, and as, people who know me know I'm very fond of saying that we have tremendous opportunity with social tools to build credibility in advance of sales opportunities. And I can just think of story after story where we're hearing from executives who are saying that, one recent one with a client, their targeted buyer, they're at an event, these folks are participating as panelists, and someone from the audience says, how do we get FaceTime with you? What's the best way to communicate with you and get an opportunity to showcase what we do? And their answer was, don't bother us with cold calls, don't waste time with email, but if you join us in our LinkedIn group and follow us on Twitter, that's an opportunity to engage. So when I think about the different tools and ways that you can engage and create credibility, one that's often overlooked is LinkedIn Answers. And so in that answers section, there's a wealth of information. Even if you never post a question, you can use the advanced search in the answers section, which is available to any of the, 140 million LinkedIn users, and do some searches on the kinds of questions. So we wanted to give you an example. This is not about selling. Those of you who are on the line have worked with us before, it's not about selling, but it's about, answering the question in a way that contributes to the community dialogue. So if you'll just go ahead and pop forward, Kent, you see here's the question being asked by Dr. Saunders. And then next is, an example of somebody who weighs in with an answer. So it's about contributing and demonstrating that you have, a good sense of kind of what's happening.
And then we have a question in regards to the last thing you were talking about in regard to the breakthrough initiatives.
Oh, sure, perfect.
Let's see if this works. I'm going to kind of do this in real time here. Hey, Sean, can you hear us?
I sure can.
All right, why don't you ask your question for Barbara and Ken?
Thank you very much. So in looking at the power of breakthrough initiatives, as you were indicating, I was kind of trying to figure out, I understand what an initiative is, but how do you identify something as a breakthrough initiative? And it's not like a question you can explicitly ask the potential sale. So how do you, what are your guidance on helping to identify a breakthrough initiative?
Kent? Did we lose you? Are you on mute?
No, I'm here. Sorry about that. I was on mute. So one of the things that I do is, you know, I really dig deep, and I think this is going to come up later, but I ask that executive, tell me, you know, why is this initiative so important to you? And, you know, what I'm looking for there is, why is it important to that individual, but I'm also trying to find out what are the consequences if they don't move forward with it. And when I begin to hear things that, and you oftentimes will hear it in the tone of their voice and in how they begin talking about it, when the consequences are pretty dire and they're like, you know, if we don't do this, we're really going to lose some significant market share, and I had this happen just a few months ago. We're going to lose significant market share, and that may result in us, and most likely, actually the word was not may, and it will result in us having to close 30% of our locations. I then even probed deeper, and I said, well, would that really be a benefit to the company if you close these locations? Are there some efficiencies here, or are you simply going to now, are you dealing with a market share issue? As we dug deeper, I found out it was a market share issue, but the consequences even got more dire than that. And so if they didn't make a change, they were going to see their net profits tumble pretty significantly. And there was even going to be some question in this particular company whether or not they would even be able to weather the storm, because they had had some murky waters in the past. So it was breakthrough because the consequence was so dire that they had to do something about it, and anything else that came out as an initiative was less important. And I asked that question.
Well, and I also think, just to tag on to that, Kent, that if you're watching in the online space, so again, you know, we've talked about some of the tools that I love. So let's say, for an example, you know, speaking to Sean's point, so let's say, for example, Sean, that I've done some research on a company I'm trying to get into, and this just happened actually with a large financial institution. There was sort of a last-minute changing of the guard. You know, the CIO, who had been there for quite a long time, all of a sudden, boom, there's this announcement, this person's leaving in 2 weeks. Well, that kind of piqued my interest, and I thought, something's up there. And then, of course, you know, immediately within a day, I got the watch alert about the announcement of a new CIO coming on board. So in that particular case, then what I would do is I'd be starting to watch that executive. What are they saying in the press? What announcement was made about that individual? And that might then give some clues as to a reason why there was a significant changing of the guard, which could mean that there's some other initiative that's going to happen, as Kent said, because there are going to be some serious consequences if something doesn't change. So, I mean, just to sort of add to what he does, that's what I'm thinking about also when I'm online looking at information that could be that golden nuggets and the clues into, you know, how you get to the heart of really what's going to be a critical initiative for them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you both, and thanks, Sean, for the question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad he asked. So, you know, again, so now, okay, so we're doing our homework, and we're trying to determine, you know, what the initiatives are, but at the same time, we're positioning ourselves online in order to build that credibility. Remember, there are executives in groups that you're participating with. They're watching. They get a chance to see. So, you know, I took a screenshot out of Coca's group with Social Selling University, and so, you know, just another example, the question is, what's the most annoying sales tactic? And of course, I captured a couple of, you know, screenshots where people weighed in with their answers. And, you know, in every single case, people are making contributions. It's not, hey, here's what we do, and look at us, and here's what we sell. So really just want to make sure that we reinforce the point that when you're participating in these communities, building credibility is demonstrating expertise. But moreover, we know that the buyers who are going to be interested in you, they've told us they are looking for people who demonstrate value without expecting something right there that second in return. And so for me, that's why sometimes, when I'm talking with people, they're like, well, Barb, I'm not getting an immediate return. And that, in my personal opinion, is because their mindset's in the wrong place, and sometimes these things aren't linear anyway. I may be participating in Coca's group, and Mark happens to like what I said, and next thing you know, he's telling a colleague in another company that leads to an opportunity. So, when you're thinking about building that credibility, think about the value, the help, and the contribution that you can make to people in the community. And then just one other tool that I find to be incredibly helpful for building that credibility is a wonderful tool, if you haven't checked it out, from Focus at focus.com, where, similar to the concept of LinkedIn groups, you can create and demonstrate expert capability here, and people will invite you to webinars that might turn into being interviewed by journalists. But again, what you're doing is you're leveraging the power of the community by answering questions specific to your expertise, knowing that other people in the community get to know who you are, what value you're offering. So again, it's kind of that proactive, but you're not only getting visibility, but you're letting people know really what you're all about. And so on the next screenshot, it just gives a few more examples of how, you can see recent activity on, that's happening, that you're answering these questions and getting a lot of visibility. And you might think at first that spending a few minutes a day answering a couple of questions wouldn't get you power, but I'm here to tell you it really, really does. One thing that Focus did that I found out recently is, they'd asked a community question. They crowdsourced a few of the answers. I was pleasantly surprised that I was part of that, and they created a little ebook. So there's all kinds of ways that you are building that credibility and getting, known as an expert. These are the things that get you the power of, getting in front of that executive you're trying to close business. So now we've spent time building credibility, but what happens when we need to go make the initial call on that executive? And Coca, did you have a thought on that?
I did. So one of the questions that came through in the chat was, an example of a wow, like the wow factor within a LinkedIn profile. Like, what do you look for, or what do you think the buyers are looking for when they look at a LinkedIn profile?
It's a fantastic question. You want to do wow? Post a video on your LinkedIn profile. Okay, go to Barb's profile, go to Kent's profile. I have a 1-minute, 30-second clip, and I cannot even tell you how many people have not only commented positively, but every single deal, every single customer mentions the video. So I think
That's awesome.
Right. I mean, that is powerful, because think about it. They may never read the summary, but you can capture their attention with a quick video clip. They get to know a little bit about my personality and style, just very brief about how we can help organizations. It's not this like overt massive sales pitch. So that would be an example of wow, actually.
And what widget are you using for that?
What's that?
Which application are you plugging into your profile to show that? Is it Slang?
Actually, in this particular case, for the longest time, I used the Google Docs application, but something got changed in the back end, so I actually switched it over, and it's actually embedded in SlideShare. So if you have a free SlideShare account, you can embed a video into your just PowerPoint and then host that right there on your profile, and people love it. I mean, again, it's they're getting to know you a little bit more about you, and it's also a little bit different. I'm still surprised, Coca, honestly, at how many people I always talk about, how important it is to get video on the profile, just like it is on the web, etc. And and I just keep thinking I'll see a lot more videos on those profiles, but it hasn't happened. So that's wow.
So what do you think that is? Do you think people just don't understand how to do it, or do you think people are like me, just are too shy?
It's interesting because it's not hard to do. Here's what I think. I think I have seen the most experienced salespeople and speakers freak out when somebody puts a camera in front of them. So I think there's maybe a little bit of that. But I'm noticing that people are learning to get over that, because listen, folks, you can get somebody to coach you. You know your business better than anyone else. When you're talking to as our colleague Scott Williford did this for us, they're asking you a couple questions behind the camera. It's just like talking to somebody at a trade show or across the table. So there could be a little bit of fear of the camera, for one. But I would encourage people to get a little coaching and help and get over that, because it helps you close business. And guess what? You stand out from the competition.
I would agree.
Right, so that's a wow. Having presentations is a wow. Frankly, having good content is a wow. Sharing your white papers. If you are a blogger, having your blog feed your LinkedIn profile so that your content is changing up. All of those things are really super powerful. But if I were to encourage everybody listening in today to do one thing, and there are great people out there, and video does not have to cost a fortune, and invest a little bit to have somebody help you do it professionally. But if you were to do one thing, I'd say do the video. All right?
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Keep the questions coming, my friends. All right, so now we're going to talk about the importance of, the value of really getting to understand that client. Like Covey said, in this case, we are seeking first to understand, then be understood, which is kind of counterintuitive for some sales folks out there today. So you've got to demonstrate that you have knowledge of their business, because that is the fastest way that you're going to get that rapport you're looking for. And by the way, this has really got to be done in a way that's sincere. I mean, take the time and really get to understand their business. And it's also quite helpful if you actually care about helping them be successful in their business. So they want you to demonstrate that you know them, and you should be striving for that ultimate compliment, right? But the thing about it is, when you come in versus your competition and you demonstrate that you've done some homework and that you have taken some time to get to understand what's really happening in their business, you really do stand out, and you significantly shrink that sales cycle. You're acting now more as a consultant, right? That's really what we're looking for here, because you become part of that trusted team. They're looking for you to help create those insights and create that foundation for collaboration, which is really so important. So that's the value of making sure that you're doing that homework in advance. Your conversation is so much more powerful when you can structure your questions or ask questions in a way that demonstrate you've really done some homework, and now the conversation that you are having with that executive buyer is so much more powerful. So let's flip things around here for just a second, right? We're making that initial call, and you've got that meeting scheduled, but you've never met them before, and you've got 30 minutes. If that, because right, they may have agreed to give you 30 minutes, but if you're blowing it in the first few minutes walking in the door or getting on the telephone, you may find your time cut short. Let's assume that somebody at a lower level in that client organization referred you. So when we think about the discussion, what we'd like to do is we've got a couple questions we're going to throw out, and throw some answers out to us over chat. What would you do in this situation? You've got 30 critical minutes, and you really have to make sure that you are structuring that meeting with that executive in a way that's going to be super successful. What are you going to do to plan for that, and what are some of the messages you want to disclose? And then how are you going to ensure that you're going to be able, that 30 minutes is over, right? Now you've made a powerful impact. What are you going to do to ensure that you are able to get back in front of that executive? So pause for a second. What are some of the things that you would do? And then we're going to share with you our thoughts on what we do.
If anybody wants to answer that question on the phone, feel free to raise your hand inside the webinar, or just indicate yourself in the chat box.
Cool. Love to hear it. So we want to give you a minute. What would you do? How do you structure that meeting? What's your plan to ensure that that 30 minutes is not wasted? And how do you make sure you get the opportunity to come right back in front of them? All right, Kent. Well, here's what we'll do, because I think they're just they're busy getting their thoughts together, and they're going to let us know here in a second. I'm confident of that. So why don't we tell them what we would do in this particular situation? All right, so the thing that we're going to do is we're going to refer back to that initial telephone call. We want to remind them, you know, why there was an agreement to have that meeting in the first place, right? And we want to be sure that we're citing past experience. And past experience, and Kent, I want you to weigh in here as we talk through the philosophy here as well. Citing past experience, to me, is not a feature dump, but it's really citing experience in terms of how you have worked with other companies to help deliver the results that you are suggesting you can assist this executive with. Is there anything more you would add on that?
Well, no, I think it's really important to do that. My experience has been that executives and those that I'm, working with, that's what they want to hear. In fact, that's what they want to hear a lot of, because they're interested in finding out what are the solutions we've developed for other companies that have similar situations, and what were the outcomes of those solutions. And I do think it is a great way to also indirectly educate the executives with whom you're meeting on the kinds of things that you can specifically do with them. As you said, it's not a feature dump at all.
Right, exactly. All right, so now we've made that introduction and we've kind of synced that up, and we've given them some relevant information about why we've earned the right to be here. And so we're going to think about the questions that we want to ask them to confirm, our knowledge and level of prep. I mean, I just can't tell you, we can't reinforce enough how important it is to do that preparation. We want to discuss issues and implications, based on what's important to them. And then, as Kent mentioned earlier, we've done our homework. We've identified what we believe are a couple of things to a breakthrough initiative, and so we want to confirm that, before we move forward, which also, by the way, doing this really cements in their mind that you've done homework and that you really have taken time to understand the business. So, next we're going to explore those solutions, right? What are some of the options?
We have a couple people, I think, who have their own input that they'd like to hear about also.
Awesome. Let's hear it.
Hey, Nathan Lee, are you able to hear us?
Yes. Yes.
So go ahead. What do you think is the most important thing to do?
Well, like I was saying, you need to make sure that the people that you're talking to, they understand what you're there for, your areas of expertise, and then why it's important to do business with you, and how you can help them.
Excellent. Nathan, we're having you join us on the next webinar. What do you think? Okay, so
let's go over to Thomas Coyle. I pronounce your name. Can you hear us, Thomas? All right, Thomas isn't on. All right, Barb, you can probably start going again.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Well, Thomas, if you weren't able to chime in verbally, send us a chat if you want to. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're now going to explore solutions. Again, not a feature dump. Just really want to make this clear. This is an opportunity to start brainstorming together solutions. What could an optimal solution look like? What could that vision be? This is not, you just doing a, hey, look at all the features of our product and aren't we so great? You really want to jointly be brainstorming on those solutions based on what you've just, confirmed up to this point in terms of what's going on in their business. And then you want to confirm what that value of that solution could look like. And finally, what's the next step? How do we move forward? And you specifically, and Kent, please weigh in here as well, what needs to happen for us in order to, reconnect with that executive? Well, one, I believe, is, some call to action that gives you, again, that right to reconnect with them and reconvene with them. What do you think, Ken?
It's really important. In fact, senior level executives told us in some of the research that they want us to be very clear with them about what we need to help move it forward. Sometimes that can be simply we would like them to make an introduction or walk down the hall and introduce them to the other people that we need to meet. Another way you want to make sure is to allow an opportunity for that return access. It's essential that you secure it. And one of the ways, of course, to do that is to say after you've met with the 2 or 3 people that they are going to introduce you to, say, I'd like to come back and I know I'll have some findings and even potentially some preliminary recommendations. And I'd like to come back and to review those with you. It's a great way to reconnect, and it's important because I think too often sales professionals are sometimes more apt to settle for being sent down and then end up operating there, losing sight that it's really important to maintain that return access. I think there's something else I wanted to point out on here, Barbara, and it's oftentimes, I think, a challenge. I find it a challenge sometimes because we're all really happy to, we want to talk about our solution. But in this initial meeting, when you look up in the right-hand corner, that pie is broken up in the amount of time, and typically this meeting is going to be 20 to 30 minutes long. When you're actually going through and you're looking at the solution options, it's really important there that you not define a specific solution. What you really are looking for there is through the good questioning in the prior piece, issues and implications, is that you're exploring potential solutions and that you want to try to get the executive to start articulating how those kinds of things could make a difference in their organization. Watch the, watch their body language, listen to the inflection in their voice. Are they getting excited about it? The more that you can get them talking about how they could see a potential solution, the further you're going to be in moving the sales process along.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I love that you just said, Kent, that I just have to, grab hold of and just reinforce, the fact that often salespeople will allow themselves to be introduced, by that executive down to other people, and then they stay there. Well, you've already gotten that relationship with that top player. Obviously, you want to stay connected and involved with them, which I think is just critically important. So making sure that you are asking, and as Ken said, telling them what you need in order to stay involved, but in a way that is bringing value. Like, I love what you said, Ken, about I'm going to have some findings. I'm going to want to come and report back to you, and when would be a good time to do that, and all that sort of thing. So don't lose sight of the fact that you do not want to lose touch with that relationship. You want to continue to maintain it at all costs. Now, this is the part that I think is going to be the most fun.
Yeah, it's really
right, because we all know everybody has their, they believe, and some of us have been trained in a particular way that maybe doesn't work anymore, but we really want everybody to get from this portion, what are the questions that you're going to ask an executive in a face-to-face meeting, and it's not always the questions you think, is it, Ken?
No, it's not, and I'm going to throw some, we have a question, okay?
Suzanne, can you hear us? Do you have a question for Barb and Ken?
I can hear you. I can answer one of these if you want. I think an initial question I always ask is, what I wouldn't say what issue, but what keeps you up at night? What are the things that the executives think about at night that you could help solve? Can you hear me okay?
That,
yeah.
You try to address also, Barb? Is that really what it boils down to, or is it even bigger than that?
Well, so Kent's going to go into detail, but here's the thing, and what was your name again? I'm sorry.
Suzanne.
Suzanne, thank you. So it's not a bad question, right? It's a good question, and I know that as I came up through the sales ranks, and that was one of the questions that I was taught to ask. The truth is, we don't feel that that's one of the most effective questions to ask when you're first meeting with the executive, do we, Ken?
No, and I'd like to, go through these, and oftentimes I have to say there's some debate on these. But what's going to happen is I'm going to show a list of questions. We'll go through them, and then you're going to see some that are going to be crossed out. That would indicate a question, and I'll comment as to why the question's not good. What are your top 3 business objectives? If you're selling into a company that's large enough where you can get some information off the internet, or you can go to your LinkedIn, InsideView, various different things, you should be able to know those. In fact, it's one of the things that you absolutely want to know the answers to before you go into a business meeting. Another would be, how do your financial metrics compare to similar sized companies in the same industry? Well, I can tell you, if it's publicly traded company, that information is available. You certainly would want to know that information. Also, it isn't just knowing it, it's the insight that you draw, and in fact, many of these can actually help bring about what some of the drivers might be. Another question is, how would your customers describe their experience of doing business with your company? Interesting. That's a good question to ask, and oftentimes leads to some really great insight. I've asked that one more recently, and it does get some great insight. Who are your company's top 5 competitors? Well, you can pretty much figure that out with just about any company. What are your top 3 strategic initiatives of your company? Well, certainly it's one of the great reasons to be using InsideView and other sources to really track and find out, what are the initiatives that are happening in companies. They're frequently certainly announced. I use and listen to quarterly earnings calls. They're almost always on quarterly earnings calls of public companies. Another question here is, what plans does your company have to expand in the global marketplace? I might not ask the question that way. There's a modified question here I would ask, but as it turns out, most of the time you can actually find that out. It's in the press. It's a forward-thinking piece that they typically want to boast and talk about. And has your company recently experienced a merger or major acquisition? Of course, that's recently experienced. Well, hopefully that's in the press, and we've been able to get that. But here's the question I like best, and I'll explain why. I understand your top 3 initiatives to be X, Y, and Z. Which one is most important to you, and why? That's saying that I have done my homework, and I'm demonstrating to you that I've done my homework. That's allowing me to build credibility in the eyes of the client executive. Which one is most important to you? What I'm looking for is, which are they potentially the relevant executive, or how important is this to that individual? And the importance is not just from a business perspective. Sometimes it's a more professional / personal perspective. It may have something to do with, if I have a great run, and I'm really successful with this initiative, I'm going to get the promotion I wanted. And why? That begins to tell us a little bit about the drivers. So the piece here that you want to really think about is, in summary, don't ask a question whose answer could be discovered from other sources, online and through conversations with others in the organization. In interest of time,
So just before you jump ahead, because I know we're about to wrap, here's what I would say then. So really, Suzanne, who kicked it off for us, and we appreciate it so much. So Suzanne, by being able to have done a little bit of research, and then you've identified the initiatives, then essentially you could say what's most important to you, or why, or what is the one that really keeps you up at night, and why would that be? So all we're suggesting is just that it goes a little further, where you kind of come to the table with some sense of what challenges they might already be facing, and then that leads to a great discussion. So I just wanted to point that out, Kent, because I don't think it's a bad question. I just think there's an opportunity to expand it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because it does pick up on which one is most important to you in the why piece. And
Absolutely.
that's what we're really trying to get to, because that's the meat of it. By the way, everyone, I happen to think that this question here, and no, I did not write it initially, but I understand your top 3 initiatives to be X, Y, and Z. Which one is most important to you, and why? I would highly encourage you to consider, if you are not using a question similar to that, to use this one and actually try to use it as close to this as possible. There are some real specific reasons, and it works well. Evolution of the trusted advisor. What I really wanted to demonstrate on this slide, more than anything else, it's important to communicate with client executives the value you have delivered on an ongoing basis, at least once, if it's a project, maybe halfway through the project. If it's a solution that you've sold, it's not as project-oriented. You may want to do it annually or semi-annually. This is a great way, and senior level executives told us in the research that we did that they will almost always grant a return access to the professional salesperson, especially if they perceive that person, not just that their solution helped them and their company, but that they really brought value in that sale, and that's really important. So kind of in wrap-up, we may have some more questions, but I wanted to leave you with some final points. One of the things that we talked about is adapting to the buyer 2.0. Certainly things have changed, and we want to be understanding what does the buyer 2.0 look like. They're well engaged in the sales process, or I might rather say the buying cycle, before they oftentimes even contact us. Look at cultivating our network and creating and maintaining and leveraging our network can be very valuable. Be visible, add value, be in the forums, be in the sending out, doing things, but making sure that they're adding value to the audience with whom you're communicating. Again, don't ask a question whose answer is already known. Demonstrate credibility. Combination of integrity and capability consistently delivered over time is very, very important, and is probably the quickest way, one of the quickest ways, to move you into the value zone and being perceived as a trusted advisor. And again, a little bit of a repeat, but important, is communicate your value on an ongoing basis. So I really enjoyed that we had an opportunity to take some live questions today. I know Barbara and I love to interact with you on both LinkedIn and Twitter. Barbara Giamonco on Twitter, or she's on LinkedIn, as well as I am, Kent Gregoire. And certainly would love to hear from you and get your thoughts on today's session. Any additional questions that you may have, you'll find we're pretty active and we like to engage with you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is always fun for us. And Coca, I'm so glad that you opened up the line and took some questions live. That's really cool, and I really enjoyed the people who kind of joined in with us. Were there any final questions maybe that we had from the group?
Let me check really quick. There was somebody asking a lot of questions. In fact, after we opened the lines, there was a ton of questions. Nathan Lee, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Did you have any final thoughts or questions for Barbara and Kent?
No, I was just commenting on the statements that they were making about the questions that need to be asked and the positioning of the person during the conversation with the prime decision maker. Just one of the things I was commenting on is that you don't want to open a door that you can't close, and when you ask your questions, they should be tailored toward the solutions that you're actually able to provide.
Oh, yes. Yes,
All
yes.
right, thank you, Nathan.
That's great perspective, Nathan. Thank you very much.
All right, and yeah, there's lots of good positive feedback. Everybody's coming in the chat box and saying thank you, great content. And again, we will be sending out this recording of the webinar shortly, probably within a few hours after we end it. And again, like I had said earlier in the webinar, you'll be contacted about the webinar. We want to hear your feedback, so please take the 3 to 5 minutes to talk to one of us and kind of let us know what you thought about the content and what you want to see in future SSU webinars.
Well, Coca, as always, thank you for hosting us. We really appreciate it. We have a huge group today, even bigger than the last time, which is very exciting. And Kent and I certainly appreciate all that you do to support us and giving us this opportunity. And thanks to everybody who joined in. As you can tell, we're pretty passionate about being a great sales professional, and there are just so many things that we need to do these days to adapt to a new world, if you will. So we appreciate the fact that you took some time out of your busy schedule to hang with us today.